So good evening. Thanks, Rahul. Um, in times of great uncertainty, employees look to their organization for support, and sadly, it's lacking in most places. Today, we have Mr. Brad Federman joining us from the United States of America to take us through employee engagement in times of crisis. Obviously, I'm talking about the ongoing pandemic. Brad Federman is the Chief Executive Officer of Performancepoint LLC. Brad is an author, a speaker, and a consultant with more than 25 years of corporate experience in leadership, creating employee and customer experiences, building resilient relationships, and promoting collaborative cultures. His background also includes sales, marketing, product development, and operations. He sees his role as inspiring others to discover and live their possible. So I'm sure Brad will tell us a little bit more about that as he goes through his talk. As the founder of Performancepoint LLC, Brad has worked as a leadership coach, a facilitator, an executive, and an entrepreneur with organizations and their executive leadership in different industries. His leadership coaching clients have included household names as Nordstrom, FedEx, Embassy Suites, Homewood Suites, Gemini Hospitality, Kaiser Permanente, Mayo Clinic, Blue Shield, Deloitte Touche LLP, Hewitt and Associates, Gillette, PoloRalph Lauren Corporation, Wal-Mart Stores, AT&T Wireless, DowChemical Company, Nextel, Genentech, Amgen, WellPoint Health Networks, TysonFoods, Subaru of America, New York Life, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, and Gulf Bank. So that's a pretty large list. He is frequently requested featured speaker at conferences and business meetings worldwide. He is the author of Employee Engagement, a roadmap for creating profits, optimizing performance, and increasing loyalty, Jumpstart 50 Ways to Engage Your Team, and a contributing author to 100 Ways to Enhance Your Career. Brad earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication from University of Maryland and a Master of Education degree in Human Resource Development from Vanderbilt University. He is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brad Federman to this webinar brought to you under the aegis of the Distinguished Speaker Series, Executive Education, Dayanand Sagar University, Bengaluru. Good morning, Brad, and over to you. Thank you very much.
Morning. Thank you very much. Do you mind if I turn the video off on myself while I do the presentation and then turn it back on for questions and answers? Is that okay?
Absolutely. I'm going to do the same. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's just less distracting that way.
Yeah.
And I want to focus. So, all right. So I want to talk to you about employee engagement in times of crisis, but I want to paint a picture because I don't think this is going away. I really, if you imagine working in an environment where the risk of a project failing is increasingly high, destructive technology is available to rogue governments and individuals at large, economic stability is in question at times, and pandemic may pose a threat globally. It's not difficult to imagine. We've gotten a taste of that lately with the pandemic and with some other things. And so the reason I bring that up is there's no normal to go back to. Our normal's changed. Every time we have one of these kinds of events, it completely shifts the way we think, we work, we act. And we're feeling that now. And part of the challenge is that because crisis has no boundaries, it can affect anyone, anytime, anywhere. We must be better at getting ready, at being ready. And so over the next few weeks and months, we're going to be faced with more uncertainty and a little bit of chaos. It's getting better in a lot of ways, but in fact, we need to develop a roadmap for wading into what comes next. And if what comes next is all about the concept of let's get back to normal, we're going to miss an opportunity here. This is kind of a practice run, an ability for us to be prepared for what happens next time something like this occurs. There's actually a prediction by experts that we're going to have at least 1 or 2 more pandemics between now and 2030. So we really need to make good choices and be in a good state of mind to prepare ourselves, our employees, our societies for what comes next. So let's talk a little bit about employee engagement as it relates to what I just described. I wanted to share a definition so that we were all on the same page as to what employee engagement really means. Okay, and here's the definition I wanted to share. The degree to which people commit to an organization and the impact that commitment has on how profoundly they perform, their length of tenure or intent to stay, and how they connect with customers, both internally and externally. So if we really think about employee engagement at this moment in time, the question we have to ask ourselves is, how well can people commit to an organization in a way that drives those factors? Well, the only factor that's being driven right now around this to a large degree is length of tenure, intent to stay. Most people, if they have a job, are staying put because they want job security. We'll talk about that in a little bit more. But the idea that we're able to focus on the right things and perform profoundly, I think, is being challenged. And let's talk a little bit about why. There is COVID-19 stress. I mean, the reality is, in a recent survey, almost 70% of employees say that the pandemic is the most stressful time of their entire professional career. And I don't know what your experience managing or looking at stress is, but stress levels in the United States and across the globe have been higher in recent years than they ever have been, largely because the influence of technology. And so if we say 70% are more stressed now than ever before, that is a profound impact. 94% of employees have noted that they've lost productivity at least 1 to 2 hours a day due to the COVID-19 stress. If you add that up across a bunch of employees, across an entire organization, across a month or two, that's an amazing amount of lost productivity. And there's been a stark increase, 21% in new prescriptions for antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicine, anti-insomnia medications that have been given out. That's a huge, huge spike. That's from the American Journal of Managed Care. And while a lot of those numbers are going to be centered in the United States, you're seeing that reflected in other parts of the globe as well. So the reality is we have to ask ourselves, how can anybody be engaged at a time like this when they're feeling such stress? And what exactly are they concerned about? So let's take a look at some of those concerns. Okay. If you look at the top issues, and this was done April 1st to April 18th, okay, the top 4 are financial security, job security. I need to make sure I can work, I have a job, I can bring in money. Number 1, the first priority. Second one was health and well-being. I need to make sure I'm okay, that I don't get sick. Third was family, okay? And that's not just health, that's school. That's dealing with the fact that everybody's home, that we're all under the same roof together. And then productivity and work was the 4th issue. And you can see how some things kind of play out over there on the left of the screen. So people are worried about money, they're worried about health, they're worried about their jobs, the viability of their company, the ability to take care of children, family, parents. And for millennials, for younger people, they're worried about their careers. How will this impact their overall career? What will this mean? As more than 90% of companies have started working from home, they've had to deal with lots of issues. India's dealt with this, I know, a great deal, getting people computers at home, internet access, and in some cases, internet access is very challenging in India. Security tools for people in homes. People live in small spaces or smaller spaces in India. So companies had to buy equipment, ship it, work through the government providers to get it into people's homes. There's internet is spotty sometimes. So companies like ServiceNow gave employees generous allowances of access to the internet, and go out and told them, go out, buy what you need and don't worry about expense forms. So you're seeing companies take extraordinary measures to get people up and running so that they can focus. Now, once we started working from home all across the globe, companies have immediately discovered that people are dealing with social isolation, stress, time management issues, inability to work at home because of distractions, not really understanding how to create structure in their homes. There's a whole new set of demands on individuals that require us to learn around leadership, management, collaboration, teamwork, that are difficult for folks. You've got kids and spouses all crammed into the same place, sometimes two spouses working from the same home. It's been a massive learning curve and a massive change for a lot of folks. And it's required a shift in leadership. So what does that look like now? You have seen chief executive officers, presidents are now chief empathy officers. They have focused much more on employees' well-being. And 63% of HR professionals believe that organizational culture has improved. At least in the short term, it has improved. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, we're learning a lot more about our coworkers. We are being invited into their homes. We're seeing people as people. We are seeing people as whole, as three-dimensional rather than one-dimensional characters. And that has made a big impact. Second thing is that you have seen executives become much more transparent and show much more empathy. One of my favorite videos I've seen lately, although it's sad, is to watch the CEO of Marriott, who had a health crisis. He's lost his hair, and he talks about that in the beginning of the video, but his whole video is about Marriott and where they are and how this has impacted them and how it's impacted him and how it makes him feel about the impact it's having on his employees. People know we're in this struggle together, especially when someone like that says, I'm not taking any salary. I'm stopping. I'm here to save as many jobs as I can. And so people are seeing that play out in the open. And I think that's one thing that's been different about this crisis versus other crises. In the past, people have been secretive, less transparent. They have struggled with showing emotion. But because this is a pandemic that is affecting everyone and it is not discriminating and it has having such a profound effect on so many industries, and it's not about someone's fault. The 2008 financial crisis, for instance, was about greed. It was about providing loans to people that didn't deserve them, shouldn't have had them, and knowingly doing that because it made you more money. And then it was about fear. It was about hiding them so nobody would know you did it. And then the whole house of cards fell, and there was lots of blame to go around. This is something where it's not about that. It's about banding together. We may be socially distant, but you hear the phrase, we are in this together. And I think that's a big difference of this crisis versus past. So in many cases, senior leaders have responded fairly well. Working from home has worked. We've done better than we've thought. Here's the challenge, though. The challenge is that fatigue is setting in. People are having Zoom burnout. They're struggling with the balancing act and the patience will only last so long. It will also become a challenge that when economies open up and things tend to go back to a different, I'm not going to say normal, but a different normal than the past, people are going to look to rebound quickly. They're going to look to make sure their careers are back on track. They're going to look to get back together financially. As soon as they can, they're going to look for raises. They're going to look for a variety of things. And companies may not be ready to meet that need. I think the biggest challenge we face is coming up ahead of us as opposed to what happened behind us. So as we go forward, the biggest thing we can do is we have to fight this concept of self-interest. Trust is built because we have an interest in others. That means senior executives, leaders, have to take an interest in their teams, in their companies, in their employees as people. And as employees, they've done it in the short term because of the pandemic. They've done it in the short term because we've all said we have to be patient with each other. When you turn on Zoom and you see a child walk in the room, or a spouse walk into an office in a robe by accident, not realizing that their spouse was on the phone. We've all seen those things happen, and it's made us chuckle. Well, extreme circumstances have made us flexible and patient and interested in others, as opposed to what we would typically see, which is when those things have happened in the past, there's been a sense of judgment that people have had. Well, if we go back to the way we were, we're going to lose our people in the process. So our goal needs to be to focus on them, what they need, and really take an interest in our people. Now, one of the biggest factors in engagement is leadership. And so I want to talk about three people that are not necessarily our typical leaders, but I think they stand out in a lot of ways. This is Imran Youssef. He's 24. He was working as a bouncer at a nightclub in the United States when it was attacked. Gunman came in and started shooting people. He was a bouncer, but he noticed that there was a door that was closed next to a bunch of people that could lead them to safety. He ran across that bar in front of a person shooting. He was a target and put himself at risk to open the door and get people out. And he saved 60 to 70 people in the process. You have Captain Sully. It was 3:24 p.m. Flight 1549 was cleared for takeoff on runway 4 at LaGuardia Airport. It was bound for Charlotte, North Carolina. Less than 1 minute after that departure, Captain Sullenberger radioed air traffic controller that he was at 700 feet and climbing to 5,000 feet. Just a few moments later, they heard Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. And most of us know the story of the miracle on the Hudson. He landed in the Hudson River and he got everyone out alive. Leaders not only emerge, but they defy odds. And then you have leaders that stand for things. This is a story about Malala. Most of us know Malala. Her father was a teacher and ran a girls' school in their village. It's also a story that shows that competence and courage transcend age and generation. She loved school. But everything changed when the Taliban took control of their town in Swat Valley. Extremists banned many things, like owning a television, playing music. They enforced harsh punishments on those who defied orders. And yes, girls could no longer go to school. At age 11, she said goodbye to her classmates and goodbye to her education. 4 years later, she decided to return to school again and speak out publicly on behalf of girls and their right to learn. That made her a target. On October On October 2012, on her way to school, a masked gunman boarded her school bus and asked, "Who is Malala?" and then shot her in the head. She woke up 10 days later in a hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, and she's now an activist. Question we have to ask ourselves are, what are those three leaders? What do they have in common? And one is, in the face of what should paralyze them, they show fearlessness. They show boldness. It's not that they aren't afraid. It's that they are able to work through their fear and move forward anyway. Amidst all of that panic, all of that craziness, they hold composure. They hold composure. There's a sense of calmness to them. Not that they're not aware or they're not thinking or they're clueless, but they're taking it in and they're still able to move forward. And that's the next thing: positivity, future focus, an ability to see hope, that there is a better day ahead. And they can share that in a meaningful way with the people around them. That they are able to manage expectations. You know, one of the challenges that we have here in the United States right now is that President Trump is getting up every day and saying this is going to disappear. It's going to be like it was never here. We're going to have a vaccine shortly. All kinds of things. And so we have a lousy set of expectations being managed in the United States. You have people that believe it's a hoax. You have people that believe it's the end of the world. And you have very few people that really have good information that says, here's what's happening. Here's what's going to happen. And here's what we can expect. Great leaders manage expectations. They also get back up. Because during times of crisis, we get knocked down. And we may get knocked down more than once. But it's a sense of resilience, a sense of adaptability, persistence that great leaders show during these times. They also help us see a purpose and vision. You know, we are not just fighting for our own health here. We want our parents, our sisters, our brothers, our colleagues, our coworkers to be healthy. We want people to get their jobs back and stop being furloughed. Our goal is to step up and restart our communities, our economies, and leaders that demonstrate how their businesses and their companies can play a role in bettering the broader community will persevere this better than others. Empathy and compassion. I think it's a big one. Right now, more than anything, people are reacting differently to working from home, to quarantines and sheltering at home. Some people are lonely beyond belief. Depression is occurring for a lot of folks. And it's easy to say, well, this is not a big deal for me. I'm adapting. Some people do. The challenge is, if you're adapting well, can you still understand, connect to, and relate to those who are struggling and do it without judgment? This is a hard situation for many to cope with and deal with. And some of us are dealing with things that we can't even begin to imagine. I know people who've lost folks who can't have funerals because they're quarantined. They can't claim a body, that they can't grieve. We need empathy and compassion more than ever in today's world with what's going on. And the irony is that we look for leaders. We don't look for leaders who have titles, and we don't look for leaders who've been in control in the past. We don't look for leaders who are running companies. We look for charisma. We look for people to emerge. Title and authority mean so much less now. Anyone has the ability to be a quarterback. I have seen presidents and CEOs take a back seat in a lot of ways to someone else in their company who's better suited right now, who can see a future vision. So here's the great news. The great news is anyone on this call, anyone can rise to the occasion and make a difference at this moment in time in a company, in a community, in a family, in a time of need. What that means is that we need to lead boldly and decisively in a crisis. It also means that we will make mistakes. But if we don't act, our inaction will cause us to fail worse. We must move forward productively, knowing we don't have all the answers, knowing we will make mistakes. Failure means that we just know more now than we did before. What we tried may not have worked, but it tells us what did not work, and it helps us see what could work. It means that we're smarter. It doesn't mean that we lack capability. It doesn't mean that there's a ceiling. It means that we're able to crash that ceiling because we've got new information. In order to do that, though, we have to recognize that we are going through something significant. Our employees are going through something significant. And I'd love to hear more about how this is playing out in your world. But here, just so you get a perspective, brick and mortar stores, retail, they were dying already, but it was a slow change. This means they will drastically disappear. We have one small business going out of business every hour in this country. Every hour in this country. So what we wake up to when this is over will look drastically different than what we started with. People's favorite restaurants may no longer exist. People may be scared to return back to work. Traditions like shaking hands, hugging, may differ, change, alter, or disappear. We're looking at this country about 35 to 45% of small businesses going under. And there's so much more that's changing that we don't even recognize and realize. The truth is, think about the changes happening on young people. Many companies have furloughed and laid people off. In some cases, they've just outright fired them. And so that is further cementing and altering the concept of what the employee-employer relationship looks like. I mean, to a large extent, it was already hurting. The sense of loyalty was gone in a lot of people's minds. And here's where that sense of loyalty goes. It goes to the concept that employees will start thinking more and more about a gig mentality, about contract work. They will start to think about the fact that my loyalty to you is based on two things. Are you giving me work that is challenging, unique, something that sharpens my saw, that makes me more marketable? Or are you at least developing me so I'm more marketable today than I was yesterday? If you're doing that for me, then I will stick around longer and I will give you my all. If you're not doing that for me, I will move on to whom will. Because I have, graduating now at 22 years old, a 50-year career window where I must make an income. I must drive revenue. And I cannot wait for you to make promises to me that you can't keep, and be 45 years old and have to look for work and not have a skill set that allows me to continue. Our world will shift and change in so many ways, and what we need now more than anything is that sense of empathy and kindness. Let me explain why. There are 5 things that people are going through right now, and they may not be aware of it, and they have to go through it. The first thing is they have to recognize that they have lost something. They've lost predictability, that illusion of control, that sense of being able to, in our world, in our country, go to the grocery store and know you'll find toilet paper or meat. In other countries, it's played out differently. There is a story about Ma Bell. This is years ago, and most of you may not know this story, but the United States used to have a national telecom company called Ma Bell. And the U.S. decided that it was too important of a factor to have one company be the national telephone company, that there was no competition, and if something went wrong, we would have problems. So they broke Ma Bell up. Now that took about a decade to do because it was a monstrous organization. And one of the things that they did when they broke it up into small companies called Baby Bells is they made sure everyone was whole. Everyone would have the same or similar job. Everyone would have the same or similar salary. Everyone would have the same benefits. You would not lose anything. And it was a message that was sent over and over again to those people. But as they got closer to the final breakup, when the Baby Bells took over and Ma Bell disappeared, the Employee Assistance Program called the executives and said, I don't know what's going on over there, but you've got to do something and do it quickly. And they said, what are you talking about? They said, alcohol abuse and alcoholism are on the rise. They said, drug use is on the rise. Separations, divorces, domestic violence are all on the rise. We've never seen numbers like this. It is spiked beyond belief. What's going on over there? And they couldn't answer the question. They were totally confused. There's no reason why this would happen. And so they called in a consultant I was lucky enough to work with, a mentor of mine named Terry Deal. And they asked Terry to help them. And Terry said, I could give you the answers, but you wouldn't believe me. So I'm going to ask you some questions. And he asked them, what happens? Tell me a little bit about Ma Bell. And they started talking about the logo. They started talking about stories about someone who walked a mile in the snow to hook up telephone lines again so a small town wouldn't be cut off from friends and family. I had all these beautiful stories they were telling. And he said, what happens when Ma Bell disappears? What happens to all that? And they said, that's gone too. And he said, what does that feel like? And they said, it feels like someone died. And so he said, that's your problem. They said, what do you mean? They said, what do you do when people die? He says, we mourn. We grieve is what they said. And he said, you've told everybody they can't. You've got nothing to worry about. You've got the same job, same salary, same benefits. You're whole. No need to worry about it. No need to complain. No need to be concerned. And so none of them have been able to grieve. So the very first thing we need to be able to do is we need to be able to let our people grieve. We need to help them grieve. We need to let them let go of what they used to know and allow them to do that because it's freeing. We need to help them convert their thinking to focus on ways in which they can control things now. So many people are going to be thinking about, I don't have a job, or what's going to happen to my family. And we need to shift that. So from things like, I don't have a job and no one's hiring, or in the United States, 30 million people are looking, right, for jobs, I'm never going to get one, to what can I do to differentiate myself from all the other people looking for a job? We need to convert our thinking from what's out of my control to what's in my control. We need to make a plan, and we need to have a mindset that allows us to work that plan. We have to take action because that mindset matters. We can't just put it on paper. We have to take control of our day. Once we've been able to move forward like that, we need to be able to re-examine what's important. What are our core values? One of the nice things about a pandemic like this, if you want to say it that way, is that it allows us to reassess who we are and what's important to us, how we live, how we work. What will we start doing differently? It gives us a chance to look at examples of kindness and courage, landlords forgiving rent, people paying someone else's bills, providing training for free, all kinds of things that are happening that we need to look at and just hold up and share with each other to feel good. It tells us a little bit about how we can overcome adversity and test our strength of character. You know, it's amazing. You've got stories all over the world You've got people like Khaled Farah, who's a first responder in Syria, who, along with other civilians who are donating their time, 2,600 volunteers or more, including 80 women, risking their lives every day to pull out families from debris during the war and the problems they're having. They've saved over 22,000 lives. You've got a boy named Oliver who is teaching girls to skate in Afghanistan because while they are not allowed to do a lot of things, skateboarding is so new, there's no rules about that anymore. You've got so many stories of adversity and overcoming them that test our strength of character. Personal growth is an output of this crisis, and we should look at what we've been able to learn, how well we've been able to adapt and change. We need to look at how this is making us stronger and identify a shared experience that can strengthen our sense of community. In essence, here are the engagement focus areas that we need to focus on while we're going through this. And I'm using a mnemonic called CARES. We need to focus on our customers, our community. We need to focus on being future focused. What happens next? It cannot just be reacting to what's happening now. That's how we engage people. We give them a sense of focus that's about the future, that gives them hope. We need to help people become more agile, help them not with global or organizational change management, but personal change management. How do we help people change? Which means we need to coach people and teach them about their personal change management. We need to focus on resilience, test people on their resilience, train people on their resilience, share resilient stories. We need to demonstrate a true appreciation for employees who have altered their entire lives to continue to help make us successful as organizations, as communities. And we need to share. We need to share who we are, whether it's in stand-up meetings or other vehicles. We need to continue to see each other as people, as three-dimensional human beings that bring more than just their talents to work and are working because they're affecting more than just themselves. If we can keep CARES in mind as we move forward, we can engage our people so much more and so much better. We need to do that by creating a virtual community, but not allowing ourselves to burn out through Zoom meetings. We need to use conversations that cultivate the culture we want. I'm asking people right now, if customers, if employees, if family members heard our conversations, would they be okay with what they heard? Would they be proud of how we're handling things? We need to build and train for resilience. Promote emotional intelligence, because that's a driver of empathy and self-regulation. Coaching, not management. Coaching is key. We need to be flexible and make adjustments because people are going through a lot. Develop agility and personal change skills. Focus on transparency and communication, and determine whether we are providing resources needed by our employees. And that means we really need to create more pulse surveys and listen more to our people so we can adjust and help them in a crisis like this. You know, there is a quote, and it says nothing, and it's actually, I'm changing the quote slightly because I'm actually combining two quotes, but it's nothing cleanses our soul like getting the hell kicked out of us. And we must embrace that pain and burn it as a fuel for our journey. You know, the reality is it hurts getting beat up. It hurts getting knocked down. But we have to rise up, and we have to remember that. There's a poem that I'd like to share with you. And that poem is, I won't share the whole thing, but I'm share with you a way to close up. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We must not be frightened of the light. As leaders, if we're going to be leaders in a crisis like this, it is our job not only to see our light, but to see the light of everyone else around us. and use that light to show people where we are going and do it in a way that brings people along. And with that, I'm going to close for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to put my video back on so I can see everyone. How are you?
That was a lovely lecture, and I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. Before my colleague Dr. DG comes in, I would just like to make a quick and I would like to thank all participants. And we have an e-certificate that is created by my team for people who participated in this webinar brought to you from the US. So there's a link, and I will now hand over to Dr. DG to sort of ask the questions.
Thank you, Captain. There are a set of questions, and I will try to sort of put them logically together and ask the ones that may be most relevant first. So,
Sure.
On a broader level, we have heard a lot about empathy, and you talked some bit about that as well. What about the earth? I mean, some people are saying that the earth is healing, and there are others who say that we are all likely to forget this once this is over and go back to our old ways, not to maybe use the term evil ways, but our ways of ill-treating the earth. So what is your take on this?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. After challenges like this, one of the sad things that happens is there are people that are stretched too much. It's like a rubber band, and when they're able to, they snap right back to where they were. Unfortunately, when they do that, they're not helping anyone, themselves or their organizations included, or the broader community or the earth as a whole. And so I think you're going to see people that are going to do that. I think the second thing you're going to see, though, is you're going to see the fact that there are a significant number of people who are forever changed, who are going to be motivated to take better care of the earth. And I think that there is going to be a tipping point in some ways for organizations and for communities that are going to drive changes. And so I think we are at a place where we won't go back to where we were. We may not make the progress we want, and we may actually even fall backwards a little bit, but we will be moving forward because it has enlightened a lot of people. And it's very clear that we are having a man-made effect that is not positive on the earth. I think this is going to strengthen and drive change across the globe. There will be naysayers. There will be people that will go back, but there will be a more fervent, stronger, larger group of people who will want to move forward. And so I think it's really going to be a balancing act that you're going to see a little bit of both. And it just depends on how well people can adapt. And some people adapt better than others.
Thank you. So a related question, maybe an extension of that from one of our professors, Commander Joshi, is do you think that people will move towards more spirituality, sort of as an outcome of what's going on?
You specializing is what you're saying?
No, I was saying towards spirituality.
Oh, spirituality. Okay.
Yeah.
I think some people will. I think for others, yeah, it's not something I've studied a lot of, but my gut says yes, but I don't think they're going to be doing it from a religious standpoint. I think people are looking for less dogma and more a sense of connection to the earth and to the broader community on it. And so what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I think, is a real drive towards spirituality from a sense of connection with the earth and with the broader community, as opposed to a religion, a church, a place of worship, a dogma. I think that's the big shift. I think that's happening. It's been happening. And I think this will actually accelerate it to a large extent.
Right, right. So maybe coming to questions which are sort of more more concerned about day-to-day operations, people's lives. How do managers? First question I would like to sort of cull out of what's there is empathy. Something that's natural. It's inborn. It certainly, all of us, I think, who have some gray hair, we all know that some of it does come through life experiences. And but then is it something that is natural, and will there be, maybe my personal question addition to that question is, will there be some do you see some studies happening, more focus in colleges formally studying empathy as a way of management? Do you see that happening? Are you hearing anything about it?
Yeah, so I'll answer the question, the first question, and obviously the second one as well. Empathy, some people are more hardwired towards empathy and it's natural to them, but that is not the norm. Most people have a sense of limited empathy because it's based on their life experience. And so, you know, I think you talked about having the gray hair. Sometimes having a longer time on this earth gives us different life experiences that drive more of a sense of empathy within ourselves. But, you know, quite frankly, that's not always the case. I mean, there are people, I joke around, there are people who have 1 year of experience 40 times over. And then there are people who have 40 years of experience. And the difference is, am I reflecting and learning from that experience or those experiences, or am I just repeating them over and over again? And so I think the people that have strong empathy and develop empathy purposely go out and challenge themselves to learn about the world beyond their borders. You know, I was talking to some of you beforehand, and we were talking about traveling. I was getting ready to go to the Middle East a few years back. I was doing some consulting work over there, and it was during some of the wars that were going on. And I wasn't going to a war zone, but I was going to Bahrain, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, those areas. And I had somebody say, "Why are you going over there?" And I said, because I was hired to go over there. And they said, "Are you crazy? You're going to get killed." And I had to explain to them that what they see on television, which is a war zone and terrorism, is not reflective of that entire region. There are people there who are just like them, who are just trying to get by, who just want to work, who want to have take care of their family, you know, those kinds of things. And they didn't have that knowledge and experience. And because I had traveled, and because I was curious about other people, you know, I had that knowledge experience. And the best thing I could do is I can try and help carry that on and share it with people and get them to try and explore beyond their world. And so I encourage them, reach out to people who are different than you. Go to a mosque, go to a Hindu temple, go to a Buddhist temple, go to a Sikh temple. Experience other religions, other cultures, other foods, and challenge yourself. If you do that purposely, you learn. It's the same reason why when people go to places like St. Jude and they visit with children who have cancer, whom they weren't exposed to before and didn't have family members that have experienced that before, walk away an altered, changed person. Do things that challenge your status quo and then reflect on it, and you will develop much more empathy. Second part of your question was about universities. Yes, I'm seeing the concept of resilience and empathy on the rise in the workplace and in university settings. People are beginning to test more for it, grow students more for it. I'm actually getting ready to do a college program where I'm actually doing a program on empathy and resilience, specifically because they requested it. So the answer to that question is absolutely, it's moving in that direction.
Great. So there are some questions maybe which are more mid-management and roles of managers in this in these times related to those. So naturally, managers as well as HR, people from human resource departments in various companies are facing difficult times, just like everyone else. Uh, Managers, I think the difficulties they are facing is they need to continuously get the work from people done in order to keep the wheels turning. At the same time, they are aware of the fact that the person you're pushing very hard may not have his or her job the next day. So how do managers firstly manage themselves? I mean, we have been, most of us have been managers. We have been through those emotions ourselves. But for the broader audience, what are your thoughts on how does a manager manage his or her own emotions and keep the balance of getting the work done as well as motivating employees and knowing fully well what may happen?
So I think if you're having a lot of emotion, it goes back to that sense of where's your mind share being used, right? So I use a target exercise where I work with people, and I have a target that has 3 circles. The outside circle are the things that you have no control over. The internal circle, the middle circle, are things that you have influence over, and the middle circle are things that you have control over. And what I do is I have people brainstorm the things that they're emotionally overwhelmed with, right? That things are keeping them up at night, and they write them on Post-its, and then I have them put those Post-its on the target where they belong. And what is amazing is when you're looking at that kind of mind share and that emotion, most of those Post-its are on the outer rim of the circle, right? And they might be even in the middle, but very few are in the bullseye, right? And so what we do is we take those and we then turn around and we rewrite them. We rewrite them so that they are now things that are within your control. So just like I talked about before in the earlier part of the webinar, the reason I do that is because it gives people a sense of relief. I can't fix that over there, but I can do this. And I think, Viktor Frankl was provided an amazing insight to the human psyche. If you don't know who he is, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was a psychologist, and he decided to do research in a Holocaust camp, in a concentration camp, and he decided he would also help people. He would provide, psychological help. Where else but a concentration camp? I mean, come on, people need psychological help there. So he did, and as he did, he noticed something, which is people reacted to what was going on around them uniquely differently. Some people just gave up, and those people that gave up had a tendency to get sick, hurt, die very quickly. He noticed that some people had finite goals. The war will end in 6 months. And if the timeline happened and came and went after their goal didn't occur, like 6 months happened and when the war still was going on and they were in a concentration camp, then that person tended to deteriorate or get killed. But people who had something broader, important to live for, did very well. He also used this with cancer patients. He tried to give people a sense of a personal vision, mission, a future focus. He used an example of a woman who had cancer and she was dying of cancer, and he was working with cancer patients to improve their rates of remission. And in this case, this woman was negative, angry, upset, and he asked her what she was passionate about, and she said, nothing. And he said, what were you passionate about when you were a child? And she said, I love to dance. I love ballet. And he said, well, why not focus on that? And she said, I'm old, I'm fat, I'm out of shape, I'm sick. How can I be a dancer? And he said, well, I didn't say that you would actually dance. I said, why don't you focus on dancing? And she said, what do you mean? He said, well, you talked so passionately about the kind of ballet that came from your village. It was somewhere in Eastern Europe. And your eyes lit up. And he said, why? She said, because it's beautiful and it's dying. He said, what do you mean it's dying? She said, people are forgetting about that form of dance. And he said, how does it make you feel? And she said, terrible. And he said, what if you didn't let people forget? And she said, what do you mean? He said, what if that was your purpose? What if that was your purpose, to share that story? And so she went from nothing to something, and she beat cancer. The point being is that when we focus on what we can control, and when we focus on something that's bigger and broader than ourselves, then we are able to work through that fear. And we can't expect anybody else to do that if we don't do that ourselves. So as leaders, that's the first thing that we have to do. The second thing we have to do is we have to help other people do it, which means now we're part counselor and part coach. And many people who are in management or leadership positions aren't used to that. And so what I would tell you is you need to freshen up on those skill sets so that you can do that. You need to stay connected with people and what their feelings are. A great example of that recently is I have a person I know who has a Monday morning stand-up meeting with their people across Zoom. And 2 of the people on the team couldn't make it. So he decided he would cancel the meeting. Well, he got 2 emails from other people on the team that just said, please don't cancel that meeting. Right now, I live for those meetings. I need to connect with and touch base with people because I'm so isolated and lonely. Well, he wasn't paying attention to what people on the team needed, and it smacked him in the face. And sometimes people don't share that with us. And so part of what we need to do is we need to be cognizant of where our people are. He has made a commitment that regardless of whether 2 people can't make it to that meeting, he's going to have it as a vehicle for those that need it. And so I think that's really what our role as a leader is, to work through it ourselves in those ways and then help our people work through it.
Great, thank you. So there is one other interesting question. So when we refer to change in the way leaders operate, right, fundamental changes in leadership in the corporate context, when we have face-to-face contact with people, and which is actually maybe the only way to emotionally connect with people, right? And that's missing today. So I mean, how does one actually pull that off?
Can you repeat the question for me? I want to make sure I heard it.
The question is, we are all used to managing as well as interacting with people face to face, and reading people's emotions, how they are reacting to what you're saying, etc. And that's today almost nothing. I mean, you can have video conference calls. I can see, thanks to Zoom, I can see, your face and expressions on your face, but that's not always the case in a lot of calls and a lot of meetings. But so how does one actually replace that factor?
I think there's a couple of ways. The first way is I'm a big believer in shared norms. So we need to develop new shared norms that allow people to express things more openly. And we need to give permission to people to do that. And I think we need to role model that ourselves. And if we do that, then that's a start. The second piece is that when somebody does that, we have to react appropriately. So if I tell somebody, if you're upset about something, you're angry, I want to hear about it. When they tell me, I'm really frustrated with you about this, I can't now react to that. Because if I do, then I'm going to shut them down, and I've just said the norms don't count. So I have to be prepared that if we recreate new norms based on where we are today, and people are going to be more transparent and tell us, right, then I have to react appropriately so that they feel good about it. In fact, I might even celebrate it, thank them, share them as an example of what to do and what is right, just to really promote the new norms. So that's one. The second thing I think is we have to ask. We as leaders have to be more curious. I start every one of my meetings with, how is everyone doing personally? How are you faring? How's your family? And believe it or not, I'm getting some very interesting responses. I have one person who is a diehard introverted preference person. They love being by themselves. And she, in a meeting last week, said to me, I'm glad you asked because I'm struggling. And I said, Jennifer, why are you struggling? And she said, I'm an introvert. And for 2 weeks, I really loved this. But I can say right now, it's starting to wreak havoc on me. I can't take it. I need some real face-to-face personal interaction. And so, that was actually a wonderful conversation that she and I had. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't asked her, how are you as a person, not as an employee, as a person? And so we have to be very curious about our people in a productive way if we really want to work through some of those things. I think that's the second piece to it.
Great. I think we are on the top of the hour already. I think I've covered most of the questions. Maybe Captain has a question or two he can ask, and then I will request him to do the closure.
Yes. Brad, we have a lot of distinguished faculty attending this webinar today. I would like to specifically mention my good friend and colleague from Mumbai, Professor Sanjay Das. He was my colleague in Bangalore when he moved, and he asked you that question on change. He's very curious about, will things change? And I think you answered that question. We will have to change. So one of the stories that I heard when I was a young boy about the United States was the egalitarianism, the equality that people had. For example, I would hear stories of how a barber had a car and would drive around in a pretty decent car. And that was very strange for us many years back, because India was not, was really an underdeveloped country, maybe about 40, 50 years ago. But today, the salary differences have grown humongously in the United States. And you have statistics where people have had static salaries for the last 25, 30 years. So that means inflation has caught up and so on and so forth. Do you think this is going to have some bearing on compensation packages as we go forward? Your thoughts quickly.
I hope so. I have hope, and I have concerns. There is a much bigger awareness of it now. This epidemic, this pandemic has really shone light on this and the inequalities in our society. And so it becomes harder to ignore. And you have people who are very wealthy who are becoming more cognizant of it. The flip side of that is, with the global economy and with technology and AI changing jobs, simplifying jobs, and even erasing certain types of jobs, we're going to be facing massive challenges in terms of two things. One is retraining. There are going to be people in this society who will not have a new skill set that they'll need to be able to succeed in that new economy. And two, a lot of either underemployment or unemployment, which will further deflate or at least hold back wages, because if you've got a large amount of people who are doing jobs that you could fill with so many folks, that changes things. That creates a real problem in this country, because you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of free time and not a lot of cash. That is a recipe for real disaster. And so I think we have some major trends happening in the world and in economies around the world that the United States specifically, but other countries are going to have to pay attention to and address. And I've heard very few leaders talk to that. And that is problematic. And that's my concern. So I have hope, but I have those concerns that I don't hear people really dealing with. They deal with symptoms. They don't deal with the causes.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all my students, my former students, my distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this webinar. And on your behalf and Dayanand Sagar University, I would like to invite Brad to India, to Bangalore, and to the university. As you can see, he's a wonderful speaker. Thank you so much, Brad. It's been a wonderful hour of conversation. I would like to thank my team, Dr. Dige, Professor Rajan, Arvind, Malti, Naveen Sriram, all of whom put together this webinar. And most of all, I'd like to thank you once again. We're deeply grateful for you to you for having spent an hour with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I humbly accept. I would love to come to India and visit with you. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.